What if the most powerful symbol of royal continuity, the Queen Mother's tiara, was never meant for the person who's worn it in public? What if all along a secret document buried in a locked drawer had named someone else as the true heir to that emblem? And now Edward has revealed the Queen Mother's private wish, and it changes everything. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began quietly, not with fanfare or press leaks, but with the sound of a lock clicking open inside Clarence's house. Edward, acting on a personal project to digitize key royal correspondences, unearthed something entirely unintended: a sealed envelope marked only with a crest once used exclusively by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Inside, a letter that had never been logged by the royal archivists. Its contents would not only rattle tradition, but ignite a power shift whose tremors are still echoing through the monarchy. With deliberate phrasing and unmistakable handwriting, the Queen Mother had made one thing clear: her beloved tiara, steeped in tradition and symbolism, was not to follow the expected line of inheritance. It was not meant for Camilla, nor held in trust for the sitting queen consort. No, she named one woman and one woman only, Catherine. The letter was striking not just in tone but in purpose. Addressed to my loyal and constant Edward, it asked him to guard the item until the time when grace outweighs position. It was a coded phrase, but its meaning became clearer with every line. The Queen Mother did not believe titles alone made someone worthy. She had seen the brutalities of public scrutiny, the corrosion of palace infighting, and the desperate clinging to power. And in Catherine, still Duchess of Cambridge at the time, the letter was likely written. She saw a different kind of royalty, one not rooted in entitlement but endurance. That revelation sent Edward reeling. He had lived through the collapse of royal reputations, the quiet battles behind closed doors, and the whispered doubts about who truly carried the crown's future. And now, he was holding the Queen Mother's unfiltered answer in his hands. What made the situation even more volatile was the fact that no one else, neither Charles nor Anne, had been informed. The Queen Mother had bypassed the traditional protocol of notifying the reigning monarch or their heirs. Instead, she had entrusted her directive to Edward, the quieter sibling, often overlooked in public perception, but deeply respected in the Queen Mother's private circle. His role as quiet steward of the family's more confidential affairs now placed him in the crosshairs of royal confrontation, and as the details spread, as whispers turned to shock, Camilla's circle began asking questions that quickly spiraled into accusations. The tiara in question had long been assumed to pass to Camilla by default, or at the very least be displayed in the royal collection as a neutral artifact of legacy. That assumption, so casually repeated in press releases and tabloids, was now shattered. The Queen Mother's letter didn't merely redirect a jewel, it rewrote expectations, shaking the very idea of who is chosen versus who is placed. And with Edward's stunning announcement, emotions surged. Some in the palace praised the clarity of the Queen Mother's vision. Others accused Edward of breaking an unspoken agreement to preserve royal harmony. But as the dust settled, one truth stood above the rest. The emotional weight of betrayal had already begun to crush the air around Camilla, who believed she had finally escaped the shadow of rejection. But what exactly did this hidden document say, and why did the Queen Mother bypass tradition so boldly? When Edward unfolded the Queen Mother's handwritten note, the palace froze. Signed with her emblem and stamped with her personal seal, the letter didn't just name Catherine, it explained why. And those reasons pierced through the royal hierarchy like a blade in velvet. The contents were not written in haste. They were measured, deliberate, and rooted in the Queen Mother's final years, a time when her voice may have quieted in public, but her observations grew sharper in private. The letter began not with pleasantries, but with command. It addressed Edward not as her nephew, but as the guardian of crown attachments, a title rarely invoked, tied to the stewardship of personal artifacts intended to carry symbolic weight. She made it unmistakably clear: the tiara in question, worn in moments of national triumph and personal sorrow, was to go to Catherine, not as a gift, As an inheritance of moral weight, line by line, the Queen Mother justified her decision, lifting he veil on what she had long seen brewing beneath the gilded surface of royal life. Catherine, she wrote, had demonstrated what no title could teach: quiet integrity under endless fire. She had endured the relentless gaze of the world without flinching. She had stood tall through media storms, personal challenges, and palace politics without seeking the spotlight. She does not command the room with noise, the Queen Mother wrote, but with presence. And it is presence that endures when protocol fails. The phrase queenly virtues was underlined, not once but twice. And then came the line that made Edward hesitate, because it was as sharp as it was intentional. The Queen Mother directed that the tiara be withheld from any bearer of title who has not proven grace under sustained public fire. She never named Camilla, but she didn't have to. The implication was clear. To the Queen Mother, royal worth wasn't defined by marriage, proximity, or political survival. It was defined by public moral character. The contrast she drew was unmistakable, and the silence around Camilla's name screamed louder than any direct attack. Bound by an archival embargo enforced by the Queen Mother's final codicil, Edward had kept the letter under lock for years. He was not permitted to disclose its contents until a specific ceremonial milestone was reached, an internal trigger within the royal household that only activated after a quiet administrative change in the Crown Jewels custodianship charter. That trigger, unknown to most in the palace, had just been fulfilled, and now Edward had no choice but to unseal what had been hidden for over a decade. What made the moment even more arresting was Catherine's complete lack of knowledge. She had never been told, she had never asked. And when Edward finally looked her in the eye and told her the Queen Mother had chosen her, and her alone, there was no triumphant celebration. There was only stunned silence, a stillness so pure it rattled those who witnessed it. Catherine stood, absorbing the weight of a matriarch's wish, fully aware that this was not just a duel, but a verdict. And while Catherine stood in stunned silence, another room in the palace erupted into fury. She waited decades to be crowned. She endured scandal, reinvention, and backlash. But nothing prepared Camilla for this being publicly sidelined, again, by a woman she quietly sees as her rival. And this time, it wasn't Charles. It was the Queen Mother's ghost. The news travelled through the palace halls like a whispered scream. By the time Camilla reached the council chamber, the tension was already burning through the air. Those who were present say her entrance was not that of a queen consort, but of a woman betrayed. The doors shut, the tone shifted. And then it happened. Camilla erupted. Witnesses recount how she slammed her notes on the polished table, her voice cutting through the air with accusations that no one was ready for. She accused Edward, of all people, of weaponizing sentiment, of using the Queen Mother's affection as a political tool. The room, seasoned in surviving royal tempests, had never seen her this unguarded. She demanded the tiara be returned to the vault, claiming that no private letter, however heartfelt, should be allowed to override decades of royal order. What made the moment even more explosive was the silence it was met with. Not a single voice echoed hers, not even Charles. Reports say he sat still, eyes downcast, hands folded as if shielding himself from the weight of it all. For once, the king offered no defense, no justification, no words at all. His silence wasn't passive, it was damning. And it left Camilla suspended in mid-air, flailing not against policy, but against memory, against the ghost of a matriarch who had made her choice years ago and who, even in death, had the power to undermine her most cherished role. The fractures within the royal family, long hidden behind photo ops and carefully staged appearances, now began to widen. William, though not present in the chamber, made his position quietly known. He did not oppose Edward. In fact, insiders suggest he expressed admiration for the Queen Mother's foresight. This wasn't just personal, it was ideological. William was aligning not with tradition but with purpose, and in doing so he made it painfully clear his loyalty was to legacy, not to appeasement. That divide between Camilla's expectation and Catherine's quiet coronation by letter Grey, more visible by the hour. And while Clarence House scrambled behind the scenes to stabilize the fallout, their official statement only fueled the blaze. It made no mention of the letter, no confirmation of the tiara's reassignment, and carefully avoided using either Catherine or Camilla's names. But its omission was read as an admission. The public, already abuzz, interpreted the silence as surrender. The queen consort had been sidelined, and not even the throne could protect her from the will of the Queen Mother. The press speculated, the staff whispered, and the walls of Buckingham Palace trembled under the weight of a truth no one could unhear. But before Camilla could mount any formal protest, whispers began circulating of the tiara's past and why the Queen Mother fought to keep it away from certain hands. Beneath the diamonds lies a darker history. Some say the tiara is cursed, others believe it was the Queen Mother's secret weapon used to test, divide, and ultimately choose the true heart of a queen. So what exactly made this piece so feared and so protected? Long before Catherine's name was ever whispered in connection with the Queen Mother's tiara, it lived in shadows, whispers in corridors, stories passed between maids and guards, and entries in redacted royal journals, all pointed to one origin and affair that scandalized the monarchy in the late 19th century. A duchess, accused of betrayal not just of her husband but of the crown itself, was stripped of her titles and exiled from court. The very tiara she once flaunted became a symbol of disgrace. It was seized from her possession, quietly removed from circulation, and stored deep within the royal vault. That tiara, said to carry the weight of treachery, was later rediscovered by Queen Mary, but even she, a sovereign of commanding presence, reportedly refused to wear it. For 10 years it remained hidden, unspoken, untouched. Then came the Queen Mother. She alone brought it back into the light, but only when it suited her agenda. She did not wear it for beauty or pageantry. She reserved it for moments of high stakes, deep pressure and historic confrontation, state dinners with hostile foreign leaders, times of national mourning, ceremonial appearances during times of constitutional crisis. To the public it was simply another sparkling relic of royal grandeur, but to insiders it was an alarm bell, a warning that the Queen Mother was playing a deeper game, one that extended far beyond fashion. She wore it, some say, when she needed to test the moral fortitude of those around her, to see who flinched, who cracked, and who endured. And perhaps that's why the tiara gained its whispered reputation. Misfortune, missteps, and emotional ruin seemed to follow those who touched it, without truly understanding what it represented. Princess Margaret, iconic, proud, and strong-willed, was once photographed wearing it in private. Weeks later, she reportedly asked it to be removed from her collection. Sa Ying, it felt heavy with judgment. Another senior royal nearly wore it to a coronation anniversary, but reversed course after a sleepless night she later described as a dream of falling and fire. Coincidence? Maybe. But in the royal family, nothing is ever dismissed as chance when symbolism runs this deep. Perhaps the most haunting confirmation of the tiara's reputation came not from its wearers, but from the Queen Mother herself, in a private entry from her journal never meant for publication, but leaked by a former aide. She wrote, "This belongs to one who survives humiliation without retaliation," a sentence as loaded as the legacy it now carries. The tiara was not a crown, it was a trial. It was not meant to flatter, it was meant to reveal. A crucible for character, forged in scandal and worn only by those whose silence speaks louder than rebellion. And in the cold logic of the Queen Mother's world, it would remain sealed away unless such a woman existed, and that description, chillingly accurate, fits one royal woman to perfection, Catherine. Catherine was never meant to know. But now that the truth is in her hands, her expression says it all. She's shaken, not just by the gift but by the timing, because with this revelation comes power and danger. The meeting was meant to be brief, a routine update on archival protocols, nothing more. But when Edward closed the door behind them and laid the letter down with both hands, something in Catherine shifted. She didn't speak or several minutes. The silence was thick, not with confusion, but with recognition. As she read the Queen Mother's unmistakable script, her breath slowed, and when she finally looked up, her eyes were full. Reports from those close to her suggest she whispered only one question: why me? That quiet moment of disbelief, of being seen by a woman long gone, was not one of victory. It was one of shock. She hadn't fought for this. She hadn't lobbied, or pleaded, or even imagined such a gesture. And yet, here it was. A choice made in silence, now screaming through the corridors of history. As the gravity of the Queen Mother's words settled in, Catherine's inner circle sprang into action, not with celebration, but with caution. Lady Rose, known for her sharp political instincts, advised her to tread carefully. The senior aide from Kensington, who had weathered countless press storms by her side, warned that this revelation could deepen the fissures already threatening to split the royal household. The timing, he noted, was more dangerous than the message itself. With Camilla reeling and palace allies already stirred into unease, any appearance of triumph could spark retaliation. Catherine listened, absorbing every concern, and yet remained still. There was no appetite for power grabs, only a deep need to understand why the Queen Mother had chosen her. Why this moment, why this burden? William, while quietly supportive, was not spared from emotional turmoil. He had always admired his wife's strength, but the public nature of the shift was beginning to unravel the fragile balance he had tried to maintain between his father's loyalty to Camilla and the private reality of who was truly leading the monarchy forward. He stood by Catherine. Yes, but the fire it ignited around them was spreading fast. Behind closed doors, his temper flared at the advisers who had failed to anticipate the fallout. He had hoped for peace. Instead, they were walking into a storm neither of them asked for. And then came the moment the world had been waiting for, but that Catherine herself deferred. She refused to wear the tiara. Not yet. She issued no statements. She attended no sudden ceremonies. Her exact words, spoken to Edward and later repeated to her team, were as haunting as they were telling, "I need time to understand the weight of the gesture. It's not just diamonds, it's judgment." And in that choice not to claim, not to perform, but to reflect, she displayed the very quality the Queen Mother had immortalized in ink. The kind of strength that isn't announced, it's revealed. But time is the one luxury the crown no longer has, because someone else has already launched a counteraction. When Princess Anne speaks, the entire establishment listens, especially when her words are few and her tone cryptic. But now, she's issued a statement about the Queen Mother's decision that is as ominous as it is illuminating, and it may signal a deeper royal rift. The comment was brief, almost faux, regrettable in its delivery. Mother knew what she was doing, that was it, 6 words, no elaboration, no follow-up, no press release or clarification. But within those 6 words, the entire palace press corps sensed the quake. This wasn't just Anne's way of defending tradition or covering for Edward. This was something colder, more strategic. And as it echoed through the monarchy's inner circles, it carried a silent confirmation of what many had begun to suspect Anne knew. She had known for years. The timeline began to unravel with eerie precision. Whispers emerged that Anne had been shown the Queen Mother's letter in confidence before her passing. The Queen Mother, recognizing Anne's unshakable loyalty to both crown and code, had entrusted her with knowledge few others could be trusted to bear. It was never Anne's role to act on it, only to guard it and wait. And in that silence, she positioned herself not just as a daughter, but as a sentinel, one who would defend the throne's deeper truths, even against its current rulers. For years, it seems, Anne had been preparing Catherine in quiet, subtle ways. A private dinner here, a joint appearance there. Observers recall how Anne, often unflinching and formal with most family members, had shown a rare softness toward Catherine since at least 2019. Behind closed doors, she reportedly reviewed ceremonial processes, coached her on diplomatic strategy, and warned her of sustained tests to come. To the public, these interactions were routine, but to those now putting the pieces together, they were rehearsals, conditioning, a slow, calculated transfer of knowledge, once reserved only for heirs apparent and wartime monarchs. Charles, sources now claim, had not been entirely blind to Anne's undertones. At least once she is said to have told him plainly, "You should prepare for the shift." Whether he understood the full weight of her words remains unclear. Whether he ignored them or hoped to delay the inevitable is now the subject of fierce debate. But what cannot be ignored is the clear positioning. Anne, the family's most disciplined operator, had chosen her side, and it was not Camilla's. This public divergence, though subtle, created seismic constitutional questions. If Anne supported the Queen Mother's posthumous declaration and had taken deliberate steps to prepare Catherine, what then of Camilla's current role? What authority remains when the monarchy's most trusted enforcer begins to mirror the will of a former sovereign? It's not just family politics anymore, it's institutional alignment. And Anne's quiet intervention has forced the entire establishment to confront a terrifying possibility that the crown itself may be slipping from one lineage to another, not by law but by legacy. And as palace walls grow colder, a second document emerges, one that may confirm this wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. It wasn't just a gift, it was a message, a secret maneuver in the long game of legacy. The Queen Mother didn't just trust Catherine's grace, she embedded her into the future structure of the monarchy. And now the crown's entire balance is at risk. For days the Tiara revelation hovered over the monarchy like a shadow, but then came the second blow, one even more devastating than the first. A second document surfaced, archived within a separate legal NV. Elope marked Regency Stabilization Contingencies. This wasn't an emotional note or a symbolic testament, it was a formal instruction, drafted in tandem with a now defunct but still legally referenced protocol known as Glenmore. Buried deep in palace constitutional planning, Glenmore was only activated under specific royal duress, namely scenarios involving potential regency, incapacitation, or transitional instability. And right at the center of it, in ink signed off decades ago by a woman whose grip on legacy was unmatched, was the clause linking the Queen Mother's tiara to ceremonial precedence in the event of disputed representation. In simple terms, whoever wore the tiara during a Glenmore-triggered transition would be the crown's symbolic stabilizer, and that person now was Catherine. Edward, under mounting pressure, confirmed what insiders feared: the Queen Mother's second document was authentic, unaltered, and meticulously filed within royal constitutional archives. His announcement was not theatrical, it was surgical. With a single statement, he confirmed that the tiara was more than a relic. It was an instrument of succession control, a physical artifact coded into a forgotten emergency structure that now found itself dangerously activated. Suddenly, Catherine wasn't just the moral choice, she was the structural one, and that redefined everything. Legal advisors to the monarchy, shocked by the implications, scrambled to interpret the document's reach. Some claim the protocol was outdated, ceremonial, nothing more than an ancient insurance policy. Others, however, disagreed. They argued that in the absence of explicit royal override, the Glenmore Protocol's terms, especially those involving symbolic hierarchy, remained legally binding. If Catherine wore the tiara, and the monarchy entered a regency scenario, her role could supersede Camilla's in all ceremonial representation. Publicly, it might be optics, but behind the scenes, it was power. Camilla's team didn't wait to absorb the damage. They reached out to constitutional advisors, seeking precedent, loopholes, anything to invalidate the tiara's embedded clause. But each move only made the panic more visible. Their requests, now leaking to the press, painted a picture of desperation. The Queen Consort was no longer standing on a platform of authority. She was defending herself against the ghost of a monarch who'd made her choice and locked it in ink. Meanwhile, William made a decision that would not go unnoticed. For the first time, he began attending high-level ceremonial preparation meetings without Charles, and more tellingly, without Camilla. His message was subtle but unmistakable. He was no longer waiting for the monarchy to catch up. He was acting as if it already had. The image of Catherine standing at the center of the storm, now backed by legal precedent and royal design, was no longer a theory, it was taking shape in real time. As the public clamors for clarity, a final T, whist shatters any chance of peaceful resolution. They gathered outside Kensington. Thousands of voices, hands raised, photos of Catherine held like relics, not because she asked, but because they saw what the Queen Mother saw: something timeless, something royal, something real. And the monarchy, may never recover from it. The grounds filled before dawn. It began with a few quiet floral tributes, a handful of candles, and signs that simply read thank you. But within hours, the gates swelled with people young and old, waving Union flags, holding portraits of Catherine alongside the Queen Mother, chanting not in protest but in reverence. It wasn't a rally, it was a coronation of sentiment, a collective declaration that transcended palace statements and legal documents. The people had chosen, not by decree, but by devotion, and what echoed through the crowds was not rebellion. It was recognition. Catherine had not taken anything. She had been called. By mid-afternoon, the campaign began trending worldwide. #CrownByHeart. A phrase born in silence, now roaring across every corner of social media, eclipsing official narratives. Commentators, historians, even former royal aides weighed in. The Queen Mother's foresight was no longer an internal debate, it was a national phenomenon. And with every shared post, every archived photo of Catherine standing resilient through years of quiet endurance, the divide between crown and public narrowed. The monarchy's image was no longer being ped by press briefings. It was being redrawn by the people, and just as the eyes of the nation turned toward Kensington, Camilla vanished. Palace officials cited a personal need for privacy, but no one missed the undertone. Her absence at 3 scheduled events raised more questions than answers. Was it health? Was it protest? Or was it retreat? What had once been a slow-burning tension had now become a public inversion of roles. Catherine stood visibly present, calm, poised, and surrounded by the warmth of a nation. Camilla, by contrast, receded into silence, her influence quietly shrinking with each passing hour. Then came Catherine's address. It wasn't televised, it wasn't grand. It was a simple, heartfelt statement released through official channels. She spoke of duty, humility, and legacy. She thanked the Queen Mother for her unshakable belief in quiet strength and paid tribute to those who came before and those who will come after, united by the love of country. No name was mentioned, no crown was claimed, yet the message was unmistakable. She was ready not for power, but for responsibility. But it was the final moment of the day that carved itself into history. Edward, solemn and composed, arrived at Kensington carrying a single velvet-lined case. No fanfare, no announcement, just duty. Inside, the Queen Mother's tiara. As he walked past the crowds, escorted not by guards but by silence, the gesture became something greater than protocol. He delivered the tiara into Catherine's possession not as a symbol of conflict, but as a fulfillment of destiny. And with that, the public wept, because something had shifted, and it could not be undone. But behind closed palace doors, another decision brews, one that could either end the war or ignite a new royal succession crisis. His mother's wishes, his wife's anger, his son's silence, his sister's warnings, and now the people's voice. All eyes turned to King Charles, because now he must decide honour the Queen Mother's dying command or restore palace order at the cost of his own legacy. The weight of the crown has never felt heavier. Inside the palatial walls of Windsor, Charles has retreated into near-total isolation. Senior advisers come and go in hushed intervals, their expressions unreadable. Church liaisons are quietly summoned, some of whom haven't been contacted since the early days of his reign. And yet, despite the activity, one truth remains: this decision cannot be delegated. No proclamation can smooth over what has now become a seismic fracture within the monarchy. It's personal, and it's his alone to reckon with. In a rare moment away from the political noise, Charles requested a private audience with Edward. Not to argue, not to challenge, but to seek truth. Behind closed doors, the two brothers faced the document that started it all, the Queen Mother's final command. Edward, unwavering in his resolve, placed the letter on a carved oak table and said only, "She wanted you to see it for yourself." And Charles did. For over an hour he read every word again and again. By the end, sources say he sat still, tears streaking down his face, clutching the edge of the page like it might vanish if he let go. She always knew what I couldn't see. He whispered to no one in particular, as if admitting aloud what the entire nation already suspected. But Charles made no declaration, no televised statement, no sweeping royal decree. Instead, he did what few expected. He remained silent. And in that silence, the monarchy heard his answer. There was no revocation, no denial, no obstruction. And that stillness from a man once paralyzed by the burden of pleasing everyone spoke louder than any crown ever could. It was not surrender, it was acknowledgement, a nod to the inevitability of legacy over hierarchy. Meanwhile, Catherine prepared for what would be her most symbolic moment yet. There would be no coronation, no pageant, no throne, just a simple upcoming state event, long scheduled, now charged with new meaning. For the first time she would appear in public wearing the Queen Mother's tiara, not to claim anything, but to fulfill something, something written long ago, hidden beneath layers of tradition, now rising to the surface for all the world to see. As palace aides scrambled to recalibrate optics, one reality stood tall. The Queen Mother's will had outlived her. Her vision, quietly planted in the soil of secrecy, had bloomed unstoppable and unbending. Charles did not stop it. Camilla could not outrun it. And the public? They crowned it. This wasn't about diamonds or documents anymore. It was about what the Queen Mother understood. Better than anyone, power is not always taken, it is given. And now it had been given to Catherine. The tiara may now rest on Catherine's head, but the Queen Mother's legacy has crowned something far greater, a new era. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.